talk about. Let's go. Episode 58. Welcome. WA Properties in Brief. Do we still have a sales boom? So much going on. And to all those people in Perth in lockdown in the Peel region, we're doing it again. But it's what it is. And considering what's going on in New South Wales, I had to chat to a couple of people in New South Wales today. So we might make reference to some of their stories, even though it is a WA program. Welcome to our Property Avenue WA podcast. It's something that he's OD, I'm TV. This is your avenue to matters property in Western Australia. And what we do, we chat about a range of things. We do facts and we discuss a variety of property questions. We try to discover the answers to those property questions. We provide some tips. We give our opinions and our thoughts. We sometimes have a little rant. Haven't had a rant for a while. And we do have guests, but we're just not having guests tonight. For those that follow us on a regular basis, you'll know over the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've had a few little concerns with technology. And as you can probably guess, the two of us are very passionate about property. But when it comes to technology, we just don't quite have that skill. But we think we've resolved it. We think we've got it sorted. And we just look forward to you playing a part. And if you do have questions, if you do want to be a part of it, you're welcome to do so through our live chat line. And of course, tomorrow on Wednesdays, we then have our podcast comes out via your normal podcast platform. So iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and so it goes on. So we look forward to you joining us and being a part of that. There's so much going on. Our topics tonight we've got include a range of things as our headline suggested. We have got obviously do OD stats, predictions of the market over the next 6 months. Where do we think that's heading? We'll probably get Oscar's opinion on that side of things. Lockdown in WA, which we're all experiencing here in Perth at the present time, and the effect on the property market. What does it have? What effect does it have? Does it have an effect, I suppose, is the good question. The sales boom, where's it at? Is it a sales boom? Are we experiencing a sales boom? Investors, where are they looking to buy? I read an article during the week where it was suggesting that the investors are now following the first home buyers with regard to the marketplace. And certainly we'll go on with that discussion because I had some really no shortage of phone calls over the weekend and also yesterday and today. So that's an interesting conversation. And we just want to keep people aware of the Cyclone Seroja aftermath. And I've got, unfortunately, his son's got a birthday. Well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, it's fantastic. Birthday today. But we've got a fabulous guest in Chatty Smith next week, and he's been associated and been involved and had his property destroyed, but is also is involved in the real estate side of things with the farming market. So really looking forward to have Chatty on next week, but I'll give you a bit of an awareness of what's going on with Cyclone Seroja aftermath. Discovering the answers to your questions. I've got a couple of questions that people have sent in to us during the week, so we'll address those. And headlines. What are the papers saying? What's the talk about property? And a few other little tidbits. And of course, as always, we always like to finalise our broadcast with an if question. And I think it's a goodie. Bit different, but it's a goodie. Oscar, welcome, mate. How was the week? Good to see you. Nice to be able to talk to each other and not have this ridiculous issues that we've been having in the last couple of weeks. How are you?
Good, mate. I just want to congratulate you on, and maybe us, maybe your IT queen on finally solving our IT problem. So hopefully there's not going to be any glitches, there's not going to be any feedback or echoes, and we can just jump into the show. Mate, you ran through a number of the topics that we've got on tonight, and you're right, there's plenty on. There's lots of movement in the real estate market. Some of at the moment, some bits just don't add up though. And by that, I mean, we've got the stats. I've done a bit of research as to what's going on in the eastern states as well, and their market's very different to ours and is now in a bit of a declining stage, certainly through New South Wales. But WA still remains very resilient. It's very consistent. It's all very positive. But when you talk to the real estate agents, they're certainly saying that it feels like it's slowed up a bit, and that sting that we had in the first few months of the year has certainly come off. But the statistics don't actually reflect that yet. So I look forward to peeling those back a little bit more and trying to work out what's really going on, and in particular where we see the next 6 months going as well. So, mate, I won't go on any further. There's plenty to get stuck into. I look forward to the order that you're going to call the topics in tonight, and also, as you mentioned as well, love some commentary and would love some questions from people that are viewing tonight. And if they've got any opinions that are contrary or complementary to ours, would love to hear those as well. So, TV, ready to get into it as soon as you are.
I will let you know, one of our regulars, one Jody Bevan, been a guest, only took 101 episodes or something for him to be on board, but he's just telling us the sound is perfect. So that's a good start. That's a good start. We're feeling good. Thanks, JB. Look, so a range of things. There's been so much going on, and it's interesting with what you're saying. But what I think we'll probably get on underway first is just your quick view of the stats and what's going on with the marketplace, both the rental and the sales market.
All right. So I'll just jump straight into the hard facts. So right now, in the last 7 days, and right now we're in a lockdown, right? But I don't think, and we're almost 24 hours into the announcement that we're about to go into lockdown. So life has changed for us again. And I dare say what we see over the next week in terms of the stats will paint a different picture to what the stats are that I'll reveal tonight. The stats that I'm talking about tonight is for the week ending Friday last week. So Friday, just of the weekend. So there were 896 sales in the Perth metropolitan area. 4 weeks ago, there was 949 sales. Now, on the number front, that's actually not such a big deal, 896 down from 949. But when you look at it on a percentage basis, it actually represents a drop of about 5%. So over the course of the week, we've actually had a drop of 5%. Now, that's a big number, 5% in terms of the volume of transactions between week 4 and week 1, going back 4 weeks. But you can't only look at that in isolation. That said, it probably is a bit of a telling sign. This time last year, 905 sales, so almost bang on exactly what we've done in the last week. So we've still got a very consistent level of sales activity through the Perth metropolitan area. Listings just under the 9,000 mark, 8,953 currently available in Perth. This time 12 months ago was just over 11,000. So there still is a tightening up. There's a short supply of available properties for sale out there. But again, if we go back 3 or 4 months, that figure got down to about 7,300 when it was super, super tight, and we had 50, 60 people at any one home open and multiple offers coming in on property. So the market or that level of activity, that sting, certainly seems to have dropped off. There's a few more listings available now. The real estate agents aren't reporting that ridiculous level of inquiry and activity at home opens that they were 4 or 5 months ago. But still, the number of transactions is very strong and very consistent, unless that 5% drop that I've mentioned just in the last 4 weeks is actually a bit more significant than what I'm making it out to be. Racing onto the rental market in the last 7 days, 754 properties have been rented in the last 7 days throughout Perth. 12 months ago in the same week, it was 948. So there is a bit of a drop off there. But again, I don't think that's because we've got a quieter or a softening rental market. We've still got a vacancy rate just over the 1% mark. Right now, there's 2,800 odd rentals available through Perth. And this time 12 months ago, there was 4,008. So if you look at that on a percentage basis, 12 months ago, there was 25% more properties available in the rental market than what there currently is today. So certainly a very tight rental market that we've got. We've still got a tight sales market. And for our Gero fans, in fact, Gero's probably softening a little bit in a good way. Right now, if you're looking to rent a property in Geraldton, there's 61 properties available right now as we speak. And we do know that within the last couple of months, that figure got down to 41 or 42 properties. So that means that there's a bit of an increase in the supply in Geraldton. It's not oversupplied. It's nowhere near that. But it's good to see that for those people that are looking for a rental in Geraldton, it's slightly better conditions today than what it was 1 or 2 months ago. So we'll certainly keep an eye on that over the next few weeks and see if that supply continues to increase. That's it in terms of the stats, TV.
Mate, I just we'll probably address that in the headlines, but there was I picked up a little reference in I think ABC News, whereby they made mention that rents are up $60 a week in WA. But there's a little article that will perhaps cover that later on. But have you seen that as a property in your property management situation?
Well, I don't know if they're referring to the mean or the median rental price being up $60 a week, but absolutely, I can say with confidence across the board from where we were at 12 months ago to now, the rental market has significantly moved and prices have absolutely gone up. And as we know, that was brought about by a few reasons. One is a shortage in supply. There was an increased level of demand. There was also that rental moratorium and eviction period, which expired on the 28th of March this year. So that basically allowed rentals to actually go back up to market levels. So no, Matt, I'm not surprised by that number. Not at all.
Okay, so with here we are now, June 30, close enough, end of the financial year. 12 months have gone by. Of course, March, April, then May started to change last year. So 12 months have now progressed. What are your thoughts with regard to predictions of the market? Where's that heading over the next 6 months? When you say the sting's out of the market at the present time, or appears to be, certainly my whiteboard in front of me is telling me otherwise. The phone calls that I'm getting, and I know how busy you are. So what are your thoughts? What's your thoughts with where we're heading?
Well, look, I referred to it before. And look, I need to qualify this, and I know you'll read our disclaimer out later on.
Oh, sure. You better do that. Shall I do that now before we do this?
Do that now.
So, I should do that. And remembering, too, that we do a podcast that becomes available every Wednesday through your various podcast platforms. So this general advice disclaimer is the information on this podcast /stream is to be regarded as general advice. Your personal objectives, needs, and financial circumstances were not taken into account when preparing this content. Oh, could you believe it? 2 weeks ago, I got that right. We also always advise and recommend you seek personal, professional, and financial advice tailored to your specific individual needs before making financial, property, and investment decisions. And this is so, so, so important. And a classic example I will make mention of that is today, where I had a client who I spoke with to do with GST, and she obtained obviously confidentiality, but with regard to information, she obtained information from the ATO. But that information from the ATO was very general. It was not catering for her specific circumstances. And so it was necessary for me to address that. And she found that a little bit odd that I was suggesting to speak to an accountant or a tax advisor, but I'm not qualified in that field. And the tax office, with the information that she was given, was, of course, it was correct, but it wasn't correct in relation to her circumstances. And these are the sort of things that we talk about, which makes it so, so important that when you talk about different things and you listen to different people's advice, whether it be what we talk about on Property Avenue WA, or you listen to a program on the radio, or whatever else it may be assured that everyone's circumstances are different. And that's why we emphasise it's really important that you get proper individual personal advice. How's that?
Mate, that was perfect. So anyway, back to these predictions. So what's not adding up for me at the moment is the word on the street from the real estate agents that are out there listing properties, marketing properties, and doing home opens and writing up offers. So they're certainly reporting the last couple of months that things have dropped off a bit, but not dropped off to being quiet, not dropped off to being dead or oversupplied, but just that craziness that the year finished off with last year and then also started with this year. That sting seems to have dropped off. And by and large, that's actually a very good thing. But where the discrepancy is them reporting this lower level of activity that when I look at the stats, I'm not actually seeing that lower level of activity in the stats. There's still still circa 900 properties selling in Perth every single week. There's still 700 or 800 properties renting in Perth every single week as well. So there's just and even from a property management point of view, which me and a number of other colleagues or industry colleagues are working in, that craziness that we saw of 50 people coming to a rental home open and then 17 applications coming in and 6 of them being really good, that level of inquiry has certainly dropped off. But by no means is it dead. By no means have we had to drop rental prices or anything like that. Just that crazy sting has come out of the market a bit. But again, we're not actually seeing that in the statistics. So I guess we'll learn a bit more about that over the coming 4 to 6 weeks. You mentioned buyer demand before and where it is that we see a shift happening there. We've really seen massive owner-occupier interest in the last 6 to 9 months, and that's been people upgrading their homes. People have been making, or some people and some industries have made some really good money coming out of the initial COVID period. There was JobKeeper, which was good for some businesses. The mining sector obviously needs no introduction as to how that's going. So there's been, quite a bit of money circulating through the economy in some parts, and that largely has also fueled the housing boom that we've seen over the last 6 to 9 months. I do see a shift, though, in terms of where the demand has been for the last couple of months, and definitely where I think it will go over the next 6 months. First home buyers, there's a lot more first home buyers now that are not getting priced out of the market the way that they were in the first half of this year. So that's good news for them. And also, I really think that there's that increase in investor interest, where people in eastern states and people from out of WA basically that have been looking at Western Australia and the major cities and Perth as a really good place for property investment, because to get into the market, the prices are comparatively low. The rental market's very strong, as we know, and interest rates remain very low and very attractive. So it just has it's a really good recipe for a great market to invest in. So and we were probably confused at the end of last year and earlier this year with those 3 things remaining the same. Why were we not seeing the investors that we really thought that we would? I don't know the answer to that. I think people sat on their hands and waited to see how long is it going to last for. But I think WA has really proven itself as a very resilient and consistent market over the last 12 months. And now with interest rates remaining low, the rental returns there, and the prices aren't at that unaffordable Sydney level, people are really starting to get involved as an investor in the Perth market. So I think we'll see a shift in where the buyers are coming from. I also think that over the next 6 months, we're going to see an increase in the supply of rental housing. And that's actually a very good thing, because people need greater choice. It's hard to say that the borders are going to be opening up with what we've experienced in the last 24 hours. But at some point in time, there has to be the international borders have to open up to some extent. And WA's got an economy at the moment that just can't house enough workers, whether it be in the mining sector or the hospitality sector, and in part the tourism sector as well. So the only place we're going to be able to fill those jobs is to get people to come into the state. And when people come into the state, they're going to have a housing requirement. So we know that a lot of properties have been built over the last 6 months and over the next 6 months as well, as a result of those housing grants and incentives. And those properties are currently under construction. So as we know that as we move towards the end of the year, we're actually going to see a lot of those properties being completed, and that will increase the supply to housing in Perth. And that's absolutely in Perth, but also in the regions. And that's absolutely what we need. So there's a few of my thoughts or predictions. And I do say it with a little bit of tongue in cheek because no one would have predicted the last 12 months as to what's happened. So can I say with any confidence what the next 6 months is going to bring? Probably not, but I'll give it a go.
Yep. Well, we always, as we say, it's only our thoughts, our opinions, and we exchange those ideas, etc., with people. And we haven't been too bad over 58 episodes. Some of the thoughts and some of our opinions have been we've ticked the box. So I think we've got a fair idea of what's going on in the world, and we're down to earth, and we're with what we got. Hey, listen, you talk about some of the things. One of the other articles, I know we've sort of jumping the gun a little bit, but worker shortage. There was a headline the other day about worker shortage bites hard, and that's the other issue that you mentioned there with your predictions. That's an issue in itself, and I know yesterday I had a friend of mine ringing me up because they are now trying to sponsor someone to come for employment because they just don't have a choice. They can't get anybody. And they're involved in the market garden field, and the people that they do sort of knock on the door and see if they're about a job. Oh, that sounds too hard. So they want to, it's not their field. And certainly I look forward to talking to Chatty Smith next week, who's our guest, which will be really good because it's such a broad range. Even talking to him today, I felt like recording what we were talking about because he's got so much to offer. And so broad, but yeah, it was just interesting with some of his observations. So that in itself will be interesting as to what that happens, because it's all very well getting workers, but if there's no housing, and as you say, Geraldton's now gone up to 62, whoopee poo. It was only a week or two ago. It was in the 40s for 2 or 3 weeks. So, and in the scheme of things, 61 and 62 properties for rent is not a lot, and it also limits you as to your choice. And that's the other point. And talking about the future and talking about where our consistent market and therefore an opportunity for investors and buyers. Talking to a friend of ours today, she's bought a place that in Sydney. Listening to her story with regard to what she went through to buy, and for those people in WA, here's a classic example. A 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom property, and I'm not telling out of school because I'm not talking names, but a 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom unit, not the Taj Mahal, far from it, in the 800,000 bracket. And that was a good buy.
Where?
In Sydney.
Oh, right, in Sydney.
Right. So what I'm saying to you, this is a friend of yours and mine, okay? So you know who I'm talking about. So the situation being is, with our discussion today, that it was just, and they were happy with that because it was a good buy in the scheme of things. They were going and looking at places trying to get in the high 700s, and the simple response by the agents was, if you don't come up to the 800 mark plus, we'll just put it to auction. And they know once it goes to auction, they'll probably get another 100 to 150,000. So this is how lucky and how fortunate we are here in WA. A 2x1, not in the heart of the city, not overlooking. In fact, she overlooks a bowling green. I said, oh, that's good. You can look at your future. But that's what they've got, and they'll have to spend some money to do a little bit on the kitchen and the bathroom. I mean, it's livable, but we're not talking about a 12-month-old unit, flash with all the mod cons. And we're talking about 800,000 odd. And that same person, as we know, has a unit here in Perth that was half that price and a 3x2.
That's right. Yeah.
In a central city location. So there we go, folks. When we talk about WA and we talk about the marketplace, we are so far in front, we're lonely. And if you're entertaining buying, it's not for us to tell you what to do. Far from it. But if you're entertaining that and looking at your options, personally, I think it's a no-brainer if that's where you're going.
Yeah, you just touched on something else there, TV, which I meant to mention in talking about. So, where's the future buyer interest coming from? And that was I was going to bring up the apartment market because we all know apartments are really good from a rental point of view, and there typically isn't grounds maintenance and all that sort of stuff that you need to worry about. And apartments are certainly the way of the future. This medium and high density stuff in and around the city centres and the cafe strips and the coastal areas as well. Has been really, really popular. It's been good for developers, and it's also been good for the end user as well, whether that be an owner-occupier or whether that be a renter of the properties. But then there's always the question that with the popularity of apartments, now we all know that what makes a good real estate investment is going to be a good rental return. That's got to be important. The interest rates are as good as we're probably ever going to see them. But the third thing is you've got to get good capital growth. Now, where capital growth happens, as we know, is when there's a short supply of something. And that's why land is normally very, very good for capital growth. In fact, in most real estate investments, the only thing that ever goes up in value is, in fact, the land. All the buildings, the houses or the commercial buildings, they actually depreciate over time. So that bit of the property comes down in value typically. But what does go up is the value of the land. In the example of apartments, though, if there's lots and lots and lots of apartments getting built, and there are the investors going to be flocking towards these easy care apartments for their investments so that they can just rent them out because they know they'll get a good rental return, they're going to get great interest rates, but are they going to get the capital growth that they would if they bought something else that wasn't necessarily a high-rise apartment? It might be something more like a villa in a triplex development, or it might even be a house where it's going to have a greater land component. Now, I've got some thoughts on that. I certainly don't have the answers. I mean, we're just going to have to wait and see because if that popularity of apartment living continues the way that it has over the last 10 years, really, well, absolutely, they will achieve some capital growth and therefore it'll make for a very good investment. But it all relates to the supply of the apartments as well. So that's probably a very debatable point. I guess we'll sit and watch what happens.
Hey, we should probably try and source a guest in relation to that because the other thing that I find, the amount of people that I have questions where there's a lack of understanding and uncertainty with that sort of property purchase, because when I say uncertainty and lack of understanding, it's to do with the fact that it's strata titled, and people have this thought that this myth that a strata title suddenly is a monster and you don't own your property and all this kind of. So it's probably something that we should really. I'm pretty sure I've made this comment before, but I've just written it down deliberately. I think it's probably a really good topic that we should entertain and try and source someone that could perhaps sit down and be a guest. Now that we've got our audio sorted, we should get someone to work along those lines because I think that would be invaluable. We've digressed again, as we sometimes do, as we often do. So the lockdown, we're all experiencing that, particularly in Perth here, and certainly they're experiencing it in New South Wales and other parts. But we're having it for 4 days, and I'm still a little bit unsure that perhaps it might go longer than 4 days. I don't know if there's been any other news and any other outbreaks at all.
No cases.
No more cases. But the effect on the property market, where do you see that with the lockdown in WA? Is that a negative? In some places, I know I read an article the other day, and it's quite the opposite. It's sort of been driving the market.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Look, I don't think it's going to be a driver of the market, and we do have the benefit now of 2 or 3 other lockdowns since COVID's come into our world, which is heading towards 18 months now. It's probably about 15 months since COVID first got here, so we have got the benefit of how the real estate market has responded to COVID, and in particular when we've actually got these lockdowns. The answer is when we first had this lockdown, it's absolutely drastically changed what happened in the real estate market. And I'm talking about April last year, where we saw our normal 1,000 sales plummet to 250 sales. So, but we've had another 12 or 14 months of learning about COVID and how to get control, hopefully, of COVID and a bit of a plan. And we've shown what our economy can do over 12 months as well. So in terms of what is this 4-day lockdown going to do, look, in practical in practical terms, TV, it basically means that the real estate agents can't get out there and show the properties the way that they want. And by that, I mean in person, private viewings, home opens. You can't really take your buyers to the properties. But these days with technology, you've got photos, you've got video walkthroughs, you've got virtual tours and all that. And as we've seen over the last 12 months, people are buying properties based on what they see. Because at the end of the day, a virtual tour or a virtual walkthrough is basically like you're walking through the property with your eyes, except you're not physically there. So they can produce some pretty amazing things these days. That said, I still think it is the preference where possible that people want to walk through a property that they're going to spend several $100,000s on. So my prediction, what does this mean for the real estate market over the medium term, and by that I mean over the next few weeks? I don't think it's actually going to have any effect whatsoever. What's it going to do over the short term, over the next 4 or 5 days? I do think we'll see a drop in transactions just because people have not been able to get through the home opens and don't really have enough confidence to spend several $100,000 on property. So if our lockdown remains just for this week, we'll see a drop in activity over the course of this week. But will it catch up the following week, assuming we go back to normal conditions? I dare say it will, because the resilience of our market over the last 12 months has taught us that it will.
Yep. And I think, once again, we get back to the interest rates, we get back to what's going on. We got to get back to the fact that people have got the financial resources because they're not travelling, they're not going away. And so there's things. And probably, if anything, the lockdown, all it does is create an interruption more than a disruption. And so, yeah, I'm sort of feel the same. And certainly today, just today alone, I operate from home, and someone said to me, they said, "Oh, how you going with the lockdown?" Because I'm in Perth, of course, and I said, "Look, it's really no different. I'm doing what I normally do. I get out of bed, I do my exercise, I have my breakfast, I'm in the office early, and I do what I do." It's the only difference is that I'm not going out to see clients that I had planned to see. I'm not going to see my physio that I'd planned to see. But really, it's not really impacting on what I'm doing in a business sense. It's not impacting on the people that I'm talking to who are still entertaining buying or selling property. So that's just little old me. So, and I'm sure that's the same for a lot of others.
It is. It's the same for little old me as well. But bearing in mind, so we operate in our little real estate and conveyancing world. But just even watching the news and looking at the CBD, looking at the lack of people on public transport and all that, and then obviously looking at the likes of hairdressers and cafes and bars and florists and all those sort of businesses that have had to close. I'm very, very grateful that my business can keep going and it doesn't rely on lots of people walking through the door. And I really, really do feel for those smaller businesses where it does, that if they have to close their hair. There was one lady who had to close her hair salon, obviously, for the next 4 days. I think she had 60 or 65 bookings. She had to pay her staff, but that 60 or 65 bookings that they were to do over the course of the week, they can't do that anymore. So, and there's nowhere else for that revenue to come from, but you've still got all your costs. So, that sort of disruption, I guess, can, I don't know if it'll sink a business, but that's going to place a great deal of unwanted pressure on the business. So we really look forward to what the state government might be able to provide in terms of assistance over the next few days.
Yeah, I agree. I made similar commentary to someone today with regard to that the people in hospitality and the people in running gymnasiums and all those, and then you say hairdressers and those sort of services. Oh my God, we are lucky with what we do, and you and I. We talk to each other on the phone. We do video chats, etc., and we can still run our businesses and do what we do, and we can still talk a lot. But with these others that do what they do, it's horrible. And I had another incident today where, in fact, it was with Chetty. They had 50 odd people booked to go up to Northampton Way for Airbnb or homestay or whatever the case may be. That's basically a non-event now because they can't go there.
50 people.
50. So you go, whoa, hang on, that's just one little sector, one little business. And as he said, he's got other source of income and other things he does. But even so, for those people, it's a bit of a downer. And for those people that run that business, there's 50 odd people that are due for the weekend, and you've got school holidays coming up. One would hope that just that disruption. Okay, the sales boom. I know we've sort of probably touched on that a little bit, haven't we, really? Where we think it's at. We've pretty much said that we think it's at a point where the sting's gone out, but there's still plenty of activity is probably the way to describe it, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we are a WA-based show, so we'll spend most of our time talking about WA, but sometimes it is important to make reference to what's going on in the eastern states markets. And for example, New South Wales, just listening to some of the reputable real estate commentators over there, they're basically saying that it has peaked again. And so now it's actually on the decline a bit. So when they're setting reserve prices and everything for their auctions, they're not talking the prices that they achieved 2 to 3 months ago. They're, that craziness has come off. So where people are expecting an extra $100,000 every time the next house in the street sells, that craziness has actually has come out of it. And I'm not exaggerating when I say the next 100,000 for the next property that sells in the street. That sort of stuff was literally going on over there, that's unhealthy. That really is unhealthy TV, and it shouldn't have happened in the first place. The volatility that the New South or the Sydney market has seen over the last 12 months is nothing like WA, I don't think, has ever seen. So we basically started to recover about 18 months ago. At the very end of 2019, start of 2020. And then we had this COVID pretty big speed bump. And in that time, Sydney basically had started to go up. Then they literally fell off a cliff, and it was a pretty big cliff. And then suddenly, I don't even know how or why, they just decided to recover. And this is all whilst we're going pretty steady. And they decided to recover. They've had another 3 or 4, maybe 6 months of just an amazing market. And now it's time for them to decline again and go down the other side of their curve. Whereas we in WA are remaining very consistent. We were at crazy level in terms of growth for a while and activity, but now we're at a much more sustainable, healthy level of growth, but still very, very strong. So, and I can't see any reason why that's going to change. So, WA, it's not just a safe place because of the way in which we manage COVID, but it's a safe place in terms of our property market as well. And we all know we've also got a lot of catching up to do because of pretty much since the GFC, our market really hasn't done too many good things for property owners. So it's about time we had a good, sustainable level of growth, and we're still towards the lower end of the start of that cycle in any case.
So quickly, just making reference to the New South Wales thing, the New South Wales things, I've read and commentary whereby in some cases people have bought property in 2020 in New South Wales and sold in 2021 and made 3, 4, 500,000, 250,000, 150,000 profit. It's mind-boggling. And we were talking about $2 million, and as I said, 800,000 for a 2x1, not so new unit. It's crazy, and they'll probably make good money out of that property in due course. But wow, it's a lot of money to get into, and you have to have the ability to pay. Which goes to the next point: investors, and logically, WA, in my opinion, is just the place to be when it comes to investment. What are investors looking for, and where are they looking to buy here in WA? Have you got some idea of what that looks like? There's been commentary of late that investors are in the marketplace now. They sort of followed the first home buyers that got, were thriving, and now the investors are starting to move into that space. Where are investors looking at? You mentioned about units, you mentioned about apartments. Is that the space, or is it looking beyond that?
Look, I think it always goes back to, the three fundamentals of what makes a good investment, which I touched on before. The low interest rates are great, the fantastic rental return and no vacancy in the market, that's also great. But the third one, and the harder one to pick at the moment, is, but where am I going to get the capital growth? Because if all you're doing is getting a good rental return and your interest rates are low, but you're not having the property go up in value, then it becomes a pointless exercise. Not forgetting that real estate is always a long-term investment, right? But we do know that since the GFC, that whole 7 to 10 year property doubling in value cycle, that literally went out the door for the first time in about 5 decades. So now we're really at the start of that next decade post the GFC to try and work out, are we going to go back to the way history taught us, the way that it always worked? And so where is it that people are going to be buying in order to try and achieve that doubling in property value over the next property cycle, which again, historically has always been 7 to 10 years? It's a pretty tough question, I guess, TV, always relating to location. It really does relate to the location of the property, and the reason why location is so important, it all relates to the scarcity of the land. And we know that as we move away from the city centre and away from the coast, the scarcity of the land becomes less. So it becomes less scarce. There's more land available as you move away from the city centre and as you move away from the coast. So always where there is greater scarcity, there's going to be that higher level of demand, and people are going to be prepared to pay premiums because they don't have the options in terms of the properties, because there just isn't the land there. So coastal areas will always be in high demand. City areas and popular little city entertainment spots like the Mount Lawleys, the Leadervilles, the Fremantles, the Vic Parks of the world, those places are nice and close. They're central, great for transport, and they're not too far off the coast as well. Those sorts of areas will always be in really, really high demand. And also, they're still
Burswood?
Yeah, Burswood. Burswood's a little bit different because, they have got a number of apartments there, but because of the size of the apartments, the quality of the apartments, and the proximity to the city, some of the prices of those Burswood properties they're heading towards some Sydney apartment prices. Yeah, really, really top end. So there's not that many buyers around of investors that are wanting to spend more than 750, 800,000, because that's part of the reason why they're looking outside of Victoria and outside of Sydney, because you can't get anything in there. Like you just mentioned, a 2x1 in Sydney at 800 grand is a good deal. There's not many people that are wanting to spend 800 grand for an investment property in Perth to try and work out whether they can get a decent rental return on it. They'd rather spend 250 or 300,000, maybe 400 or 500,000. But the very reason why they're wanting to invest in Perth or in WA is because they don't have to pay those massive prices that they would otherwise pay in Sydney or Melbourne.
Yep. I've always. Would you like to know my philosophy when it comes to investment property?
Probably would be the right thing to ask you. So, yes, Tony, tell me what you think. What's your philosophy?
No, in my history and my longevity, I've always worked on the basis, similar to what you were talking about, but I've always worked on the basis of a 5K, 10K, and a 15K radius from the CBD location, particularly in the city area. So I've always worked on when it comes to what I've been doing as far as investment property is concerned, I've worked exactly on that basis. What is in that 5K zone, be it the Leadervilles, the West Leadervilles, the North Perths, the South Perths and that sort of thing, Como. But then you see Como now at the moment, some of that is really quite got up there with price-wise. But I've always worked on that. And then if that's not that opportunity, then 10Ks is still not far away. And as like you said before, close proximity to transport. And I've been out to Clarkson the other day, ironically, where guess what?
Yeah.
I've got my nephew's a first home buyer, and I've been helping him. And went out to have a look at his property. Great little setup, and it's a great shopping centre. I've never really been out there. It's amazing, it's a great spot. But for me, too far away. I wouldn't buy there. Great, he loves it. He works out that way. So for him, and he's quite excited. I've been out to Ellenbrook again. Fabulous. The facilities out there. My son lives out there, and it's great. It's fabulous. And the property, the home he bought before Christmas. Really, really happy, and it's a really nice home, and probably a lot more money if he bought it here closer to the city. But it's great for kids and everything else. But again, just like what you're saying, if I was looking at that for an investment opportunity, I wouldn't entertain those areas. So it's along the lines of exactly what you're saying. They are the philosophies that I've used, and I would suggest they've been relatively successful in that thing. But yeah, it's an interesting point with regard to what you're saying and how it works. And I just thought I'd throw my two boss worth in, whether it really counts or not. Who cares?
I was going to ask you anyway, but you just you jumped before I had the chance. Before I had the chance to even ask you, you just popped up and said that. So, but I really was going to ask you. I
just thought I'd blow my own trumpet. Hey, the other thing being Cyclone Seroja. We've talked about it before, and I just want to keep this little segment. Even if it's only a couple of minutes, we're certainly going to get, as I said, next week we're going to get Chaddy Smith on. Chad works in the real estate industry in the Midwest region, mainly associated with the farming, the rural sector. But he's got a really interesting life, a great story, and a really earthy, down to earth fella. In fact, you may recall he hit the headlines the other day in the West Australian because he and his family, his little boys, when Josh Kennedy went up there to donate some money, and they saw some photos. Well, Chad and his family were in that, but he's just a really earthy guy, and I enjoy the friendship I have with him, and he's coming on next week to discuss. But it was just interesting what he's saying, the work that he's been doing. Like, he's got a property that they are lucky, so their home has been smashed, and they are now living in their basically their cottage, their area that they rent out for Airbnb and homestay and stuff. But just his awareness and telling us what's going on, it's still a long way away. And the other part that he pointed out with regard to Cyclone Seroja and why we want to maintain this awareness and realise that the towns and the communities in those areas are still a long way away from being rebuilt.
Yeah.
And I think the point that he pointed out today is where, and I've said this before, is where people's mental health will be when suddenly 3 months go by and 6 months go by, and suddenly there's still a lot of challenges going on, and what there's going. So for those that are maybe listening to us, or you've got some friends or whatever, please ensure that people are aware that this stuff is still going on. People are still going through some significant challenges from that cyclone that was now some 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks ago. And a lot of people there's still people without power, mate. There's still people that don't have power. Can you imagine if you didn't have power for 10 weeks? You can't imagine. And you're running, there's farmers that are still running off generators. Now, that sounds, they've got power, they've got a generator. But it costs them a lot of money for fuel to run those generators, and you just don't have those things that you and I are so accustomed to. And we have the power out for a couple of hours and what do we do? We've got to find a candle. And I think people in the city and whatever, and those areas that haven't been affected, remember those people. And if you can help in some small way, do a bit of a check. I posted a thing the other day. It was really interesting. See that post I put on the other day on the Property Avenue? Someone had written up some stats and what people have done. Staggering. So we'll talk to Chatty next week about that. But please keep those communities in your thoughts. And please, if you can help in some way, please pass that message out there and make sure that they're not forgotten, because I think it's really important.
I'm glad you mentioned it, TV. I know that you always will, and it won't be the last time either. But just that awareness to Cyclone Seroja, the Northampton people, the Three Springs, and Mouchet and Kalbarri,
Perenjori.
obviously. Yeah, all through that area. And you also mentioned mental health as well. And as you know, about a month or 6 weeks ago, I did that speaking course. And the guy that runs, Speakers Institute Global, is a bloke by the name of Sam Cawthorne, and he does a lot of professional and keynote speaking. And the thing that he said now, the highest demand topic of well-being. It's all
Yep.
about well-being,
Yep.
not because of Cyclone Seroja, but for things that adversely affect our life. And in particular, globally, obviously it's been COVID, and just that awareness for people's well-being and mental health state it's never really been bigger than what it is now. So just having that awareness, I think, is just a great starting point.
Yep. I've got some questions. Hi, Oscar and TV. I have my property for sale. It's been listed, but I've given my keys out, and it appears that I have some parts of my property have disappeared, and no one seems to take claim, and they've no record of who they've given keys out to. How should that normally be addressed? I didn't know how to answer that question, to be honest, and I thought, well, who else to ask but one Oscar de Souza?
Yeah, look, it's actually a You should have told me about this before asking me on air.
I'm sorry, but you know what we're like. We're running around last minute, as we do, and you were busy and I was busy. But we can cover that question for next week if you want.
Mate, it's look, I'm just trying to the bit that's got me is I've got a gut feel, and I've heard of people having experience with that before. I'm just not certain whether there is something in like the real estate agent's code of conduct, or if there's some bit of legislation somewhere that says who actually carries the responsibility if something does go missing at a property that's for sale. What I do know, or like my thoughts are, it's almost a bit of a joint responsibility. Like there's some responsibility and accountability towards the property owner, but then the real estate agent who's running a home open or a private viewing must also have some responsibility and accountability as well. So, mate, I'd prefer to actually do a bit of digging on that and trying to work out if there's some sort of a standard as opposed to any further speculation on my part.
All right, well, let's go back to that next week. So we've got a question to follow up on next week, and I've just put a little asterisk on that. So that the other question I had, and it was a very general question, was actually raised with me during the week, the question was raised that TV, I bought buying a property and doing an offer, but the offer that they had, they were concerned because they said, "Oh, we want to do a building inspection, but the contract, the offer had stated the fact that they weren't sure whether some of the extensions on the property that had been done had council approval because they were there when we bought them. So they weren't going to take any responsibility. And they wanted the buyer to sign the contract to accept that." Now, my question to that is, okay, so, and I think we've had something similar to this before, but my question to this was, okay, so you're then taking that property on. What are you going to do when the council comes knocking on your door and decides that you don't have approval for those extensions, renovations?
Yeah, well, I guess the answer is whoever is the owner of the property at the time for extensions. I think they're the ones that are going to have to carry the can. Whether the council actually takes it further and goes back to the people that and looks for some way to prosecute the people that had completed illegal extensions is, I guess, it's up to them. But both the property owner at the time, if the council comes along and says there's a games room that's been added on and it really shouldn't have been there, I would have thought that's going to be the property owner at the time in the first instance that's going to have to deal with that. But look, I guess it's one of those things from a buyer's point of view. If I was the buyer and I was told that I have to sign something, and whatever is there, the sellers aren't going to take any responsibility for it. That to me would be a massive red flag, where I'd be wanting to get further clarification. And also, I do know that a lender, if a lender is going to be lending money on that house via their valuer, they'll have ways that they can check that sort of stuff out as well, because typically if the bank's going to lend money, it becomes a problem for not only the property owner but also the bank, because they've lent money on the basis that everything that's there adds value and therefore would be approved. And if it turns out that some or all of the improvements had to be demolished because they were never improved, that actually affects the bank's security. So I'd tread very, very carefully around that issue, TV.
Yeah, I would too. My advice to the client was, I was concerned that the real estate agent would sort of encourage them to sign that. And I questioned that because I feel that that is not ethical. And I felt that the buyer was being put under pressure with regard to that. So, yeah, I'm in situations like that, and I've had this more than once that's raised with me, incidentally. It's something that I would strongly recommend. If you were put in that position, I'd strongly recommend that you reassess your thinking with regard to that. Hey, listen, we're running out of time, so I just noticed where we're at. But I just wanted to make mention, and perhaps we'll raise this again next week with. But there's been some really interesting headlines around the place. But one of them was, and it wasn't property related, but I read an article and I thought, this is Oscar de Souza all over. A lady, did you see the lady who did a 1 kilometre swim? So there's a group that swim around the world, and you've got to swim. You've got to do a specific requirement. You've got to have a test. You've got to check your health, etc. And you swim in water like in 3 degrees temperature or below 3 degrees temperature, and you've got to swim 1 kilometre. And you can't wear wet weather gear, so you've got to wear the specifics as to what you can wear, and you're not allowed to have music when you do the swim. And apparently, she was telling the article reads that she, I think she swam was it Threadbro, and can you imagine how cold? But it takes something like months for the tingling in the hands of your feet and your hands to get over from the cold. And she practiced. She filled the deep freezer with ice and water. That's what she practiced in to get her body familiar with the cold. That would be you all over, I reckon.
What's this got to do with me?
I just thought it just reminded me of someone who likes challenges. I just thought, this is all over. You'll be all over that. Swimming in 3 degrees temperature.
Mate, I'd love to read the story. I'll watch the YouTube video. I'll do all that, but it's not going to be me in that. No way.
The other thing is, there was an article in the paper, in fact, on ABC News, that they made reference to a young couple, and this wasn't here, but you thought, woo-wee, that's scary, where they, in fact, it was in Tasmania, and they basically were put under pressure because of the boom. Their incentives. The buyers were being encouraged to consult an expert before signing contracts, because what they're saying is, and it's a bit like what we're talking about, if you're not sure about things, then engage someone to assist you with this process. You can get buyers agents, and you can get consultants and whatever to help you with your buying process. And certainly I've been involved in that myself with a few first home buyers of late. But these people were getting funding from the federal government home package, etc. And then they were, ironically, how I picked it up, and this is how you can misconstrue articles. They were talking about a house and land package in Perth, but Perth is just out of Launceston in Tasmania, not Perth, WA. Right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's how I picked up on the article. But the total cost was $359,000, which they are able to afford with the help of the grants. But the house was pretty much fitted to the liking. They paid the deposit, and everything was going smoothly until about 2 weeks prior, because the couple originally pushed for a 21-day finance clause with the vendor, because the vendor was putting pressure on to proceed. They were pre-approved but relying on 2 grants. The vendor wouldn't budge on a 14-day finance clause. 14-day finance clause, right? And we all know how tough it is with finance at the moment. They tried to change this back in February, but the vendors denied to do it. 14 days just didn't work. Anyway, eventually, because the banks are so busy, as we've been saying for weeks, anyway, eventually the house was completed and the couple went about to secure their finance. It's obviously a slightly different process. The house was valued and approved by the bank, but then when there were delays because the government grants got delayed. So what happened then is, because the 14 days had expired, the next week the vendor terminated the contract.
Right.
How would you be? So this couple now have got the same house now. They then offered them to buy it again, but it was going to cost them a further $91,000. So it's gone up in that time, right? And so they're now living with the parents, and they paid money for blinds, appliances, and a dining room table, a very expensive dining room table that's due to rock up any time, but they've got nowhere to put it. What a horrible story.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of stuff that you've got to be very, very careful with. And I say it all the time when you're doing contracts, consistently. I don't care what the real estate agent says. You've got to protect you, because if you get it wrong and all of a sudden that vendor says, you know what, I'm not doing this variation, I'm not doing extension, it can cost you a lot of money, be it in penalties or lose that opportunity. And that's why I keep on saying your time frames are so important.
Yeah. I've got nothing to add to that, TV. You've just hit the nail on the head there, mate. It's very, very important to get some independent advice, because let's face it, when you're buying a real estate asset, often it's a pretty exciting, experience, and sometimes you can lose that level of rationality or impartiality, and it's really, really handy. And for the tiny bit that you'd pay, if and when you pay, to have someone who's not emotionally involved, who's not going to get all excited, but it's going to offer you some qualified and experienced guidance, it's worth its weight in gold, mate. It's an absolute no-brainer.
So there's been a few headlines. One of them was one of the regional living not at all it's cracked up to be. Well, I think we might have to have a look at that little topic later on in an episode or two. And there's, as I mentioned earlier on, rents are up $60 a week in WA. But if you're a homeowner, there was a reference there about that, and they were talking about the fact that people are comfortable with where they're at because of low interest rates, and we're a little bit stable in the housing market. So there's a few little articles there, and they're suggesting that I think it was on the weekend, high debt to limit interest rate hikes, says a Westpac expert. They're saying that the high debt levels could limit interest rates getting carried away.
It could limit interest rates getting... Oh, why?
Increasing. Well, because they're concerned about the level of debt. I don't know. We'll look into that later on. We'll get someone in finance as an episode. Yeah. But they're just headlines. The purpose of this little segment is to discuss headlines, not go into detail, okay?
Well, the other thing, just on the topic of interest rates, mate, we've been banging on about it, and I certainly been banging on about it since later last year. I reckon from about August, September last year, about my prediction with the real estate market going so crazy nationally that we're going to see an interest rate movement far sooner than what the Reserve Bank has been saying, and they were saying not before 2024. That's all. That actually, this is one that we have got right. That has certainly changed, and that's all I have to say because you're ringing the bell.
I left my little bell behind. I was in Germany. No, keep going. I'm only joking. I just looked at the time. We've done an hour. I can't believe that. There's so much to talk about.
But no, the RBA and using interest rates to control the ridiculous crazy level of the activity in the real estate market. They've already reviewed their position, and aside from the Reserve Bank, all the major banks themselves have actually significantly reviewed their position, and have even started increasing the lock-ins for the lock-in rates for 4 and 5 year terms. So if the Reserve Bank isn't going to do anything about it, certainly the major lenders have already started shifting their interest rates up because they know what's coming.
Hey, by the way, just before we wind up and do the if question, just remembered our little first home buyer journey. He's now got the next stage. He's bought a house.
We've got to get him back.
No. So I think we're planning to do that. We may do a pre-recording with him and just have it as the first home buyer segment, and we might cover a few first home buyer things with him.
So he's bought one, has he?
Yep, he's done. He's got an offer. It's happening. He's now waiting on the finance side of things to be sorted, and he's rocking and rolling. And I was trying to get him on tonight, but he also had some commitments, and because he works in the mental health space, so so we need to have a chat to him. So yep, Kieran's he's on that next part of his journey, and so we'll look forward to having a chat to him. So that was the other thing. The if question. If you're having a milestone birthday, and like so many of us, your kids decide to get you something a little bit different. They try and be a little bit fancy. So when I say milestone, I don't mean 30 or 40-year-old, because you don't have kids that old at that stage. But when you get to my stage of life, then you do have kids that age. As a present, they often decide they'll get something challenging that, Dad would love that, or Mum would love that, like all these weird and wonderful things. If that be the case, what present would you not be enthusiastic about?
Oh, right. Okay.
Right? You with me?
Yeah. What sort of a milestone present would I not?
What sort of a milestone? If you were having a significant milestone birthday, so your 60th, your 70th, or the 80th, what if that be the case? What would be the present you're hoping you didn't get?
Skydiving.
No, I'm with you.
Yeah, definitely the skydive, mate. There's a reason why. Yeah. Oh, parachute. Yeah. There's a reason why skydiving is that much of a thrill or whatever. It's because, you know what? I better not swear here, but I'd like to be able to. Humans aren't meant to fly. So why would we
bungee jumping? That's another one. Bungee jumping.
Why would we do that?
No. It's not for me. It ain't happening. I've already
What's
told the boys.
Is that what you were going to say as well? Skydiving,
parachuting, bungee jumping. I'm not into heights, mate. I've had enough falls of late. I've already, I'm back at the physio again. I'm on rehab again. No golf, no running. I've torn my meniscus, so I've got my physio. I think he just shakes his head and said, "You silly old man." But it was just one of those weird things. Hey, listen, it's been great talking to you again. I always enjoy it. Some great topics, and we will follow up on a couple of those questions for next week. For those that are listening, our podcast comes out tomorrow, so you can get it on all the various podcast platforms. For those that are watching, thank you very much. If you've got any questions, you're always welcome to send them through by our Facebook page or our Instagram page. We're available on Twitter. You can go on our live chat line when we do a live stream. So good to get through without any issues with our sound. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. But look forward to you next week. Anytime you can contact Oscar or I through our respective businesses. If you've got any questions or anything that we can help you with, you're always welcome to give us a shout via through our business. But folks, been a pleasure. Really, really enjoyed it. Please stay safe. Those that are in lockdown, enjoy it. Look at the positivity about it all. And we look forward to some fun and doing it all again next week. Take care. Thanks, OD. Been a pleasure.